Oh man, looking at old Shinobi, look at that back dodge. Holy smoke, that back dodge is ridiculous. One parry, boom shakalaka. That's 20 damage if I'm correct. 20 damage right there, and then a light parry. Look at the health. Look at the health. Oh my god, that's literally just 2 parries, and then the Shinobi is already dead. The Shinobi now the Shinobi's cooked. He's actually cooked, dude. Dude, that's literally 3 parries, and then Shinobi is dead. That is so ridiculous. This character, in a nutshell, it's not even a real character. Lawbringer is not real. He can't hurt you anymore. He can't hurt you anymore. He got nerfed. 3 light parries, and then you are cooked. Lawbringer was the strongest character in the entire game before his nerf or before his rework. This character was absolutely AIDS, but so satisfying to play because at least you had to go for parries. But back in the day, going for parries wasn't that hard because things were a lot more reactable. You made it. Welcome back, yeah, BEA, beautiful souls. Today's video is going to be a retrospective on Lawbringer. I feel like the game has been out long enough, almost 10 years. It's 9 years right now, and we are guaranteed to get another year, which is fantastic. So all the OG For Honor players, or For Honor players that are currently still playing, are going to be incredibly happy. If you haven't seen my old Aramusha video, which is the retrospective of him, and I felt like I was a little bit biased because I was an Aramusha main back in the day, but now we're going to go over and look at Lawbringer, and what a treat and what a gem he was. Same thing for Aramusha, quite an incredibly different playstyle that has evolved over the years. Now, if you've seen and you've played Lawbringer now, he's essentially you bash after every single move. And you can still try to go for really sick parries, although you won't be able to get some satisfying parries like before and get some cool looking animations. Lawbringer truly, I think he really defined For Honor. So in today's video, I'm gonna answer the question, is old Lawbringer, pre-CCU Lawbringer, especially 2017, 2018 Lawbringer, better than today's Lawbringer? And when I say better, I mean how unique is the character? How does he feel? Does he feel better to play? Does the character have satisfying moves that other players will learn to love and pick up? Is he someone that makes people go, this is something that you can only find in the hit game For Honor made by the small indie company Ubisoft? And I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, Shove on Block was pretty freaking sick, one of the most unique mechanics out there. This character simply could just parry you, and within 3 parries, you were dead. Doesn't matter if it's a light parry or even a heavy parry. Now that's crazy to think about, right? Now we just parry a heavy attack, you only get maybe 12, 15 damage. Some characters, perhaps with the wall splat, get 30, and even more so, Afira could probably get way more nowadays with 42, if I recall correctly. And Centurion also gets a ton. Now Lawbringer, he doesn't really get that anymore in heavy parry. You don't get anything except for normal 15 damage light, or going to a bash to get your 13 damage. Lawbringer has changed completely, absolutely completely. If you see in the big gameplay here, this is Lawbringer shove on block. Every time he would block an attack, he would interrupt your moveset and shove you away. That was the character back in 2017, 2018. This character was a turtle god. People played him to shove people every single time. It was honestly so fun. This character, Lawbringer, he would truly define For Honor back in the day. He was the turtle god. He made it so that Lawbringer would shove every single person that he blocked. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it was one of the most cancerous things ever. And the thing is, this character really had no offense. Same thing for Aramusha and a lot of characters. They really had no good neutral. The neutral was baiting stuff out. The neutral was going for this nasty light parry or even a heavy parry. If you got parries down with Lawbringer, you would absolutely annihilate the enemy player. There was no chance they had to win the game because with 3 light parries, you're dead. With 3 heavy parries, you're dead. There's walls everywhere. There was just so much easy access for free damage. Lawbringer did 50 damage per light parry. 50 damage per light parry, guys. What defined Lawbringer was his impale. His impale did 20 damage. On a heavy parry, boom, go for the impale, and then go for the top heavy, which was 30, does the stun and blind effect. So if you had decent enough reactions, you could react to the animation, see where he was going, you could possibly block the light. And so a 20 plus a 30 is already 50 damage, so he already has the light parry ad mortem, which is 50 damage, and then guaranteeing that follow-up light attack was already already an insane amount of damage. You would just die instantly if you're near a wall and you got parried. So what you had to do was you had to play super defensively, but it's kind of hard to even go into your offense against a Lawbringer. You want to know why? Because Lawbringer, he had a neutral 400 ms top light. Like, mind you, a neutral one. He also has a chain 400 ms top light too, but everyone knew that. But the neutral one, that was 400 ms. Incredibly good for interrupting players who can go into their chain. Now, this character also had a weird unlock tech where you could unlock and then light and it would go into your mix-up still, but it would be 400 ms and the animation looked a bit funky. So back in the day, unlocking had no penalties whatsoever. Absolutely zero. You could lock on back instantly. And so Lawbringers would always try unlocking and go for the light input afterwards, and then people would be really scared of that, and so they had to try to go for the parry to punish him. But you know, of course, you could just throw a raw top heavy and then they would just eat that. So Lawbringer had a ton of scary defensive measures. The chain bash or his neutral bash also had hyper armor, so you could option select quite a few things. But granted, during this iteration of his first years, he didn't really have that good of iframes and vulnerabilities. Later on, when he got buffed, he was able to just simply dodge on red, and that was the character, dodge on red, during the 2018 eras when he got buffed. But when he first came out, he was a very slow and clunky character with fast neutral light attacks and high damage punish values. Ad mortem, stun, impale. This character was a poke god, he was a defense god, he was shoving you all the time. There was no way you could actually play the game against the character. But I'm not gonna lie to you, the shove on block thing was pretty much useless because you weren't really guaranteed any damage. If you knew how the mix-up worked, you weren't guaranteed any damage. As soon as you saw the light input, you could just instantly dodge that. As soon as you saw the heavy input, you could just dodge that or do nothing. Like, if you saw an indicator, if you saw any indicator, all you had to do was dodge. Even his chain heavy, which would come out instead of a light attack if you decided to do that, it would not even track. Sometimes it would, but it had a horrible tracking problem. So the character actually had no offense after doing shove on block. All it did was it would just drain a little bit of stamina and then push them away. It also cost stamina to use that, but it's just a really cool animation that I think a lot of people liked using, even though it had no real presence in the fight. Like, you just use this to push them back off you. It still looked cool, you know, because looking cool is a part of For Honor. It's about 80% of For Honor in my opinion. Now, when I played him back in the day, Lawbringer, if you could parry light attacks, if you could parry heavy attacks, your opponent was pretty much screwed. There was no way he was able to win his games. Like, there's just no way. Honestly, a lot of people didn't like fighting Lawbringer for this specific reason, because every time you tried to attack, he would stop you from attacking. And when someone is so strong on defense, especially a really good player, it's not that fun trying to break him. Breaking him as a character with no offense like Aramusha was impossible. If they could parry heavy attacks, if they could parry 5 RMS light attacks, you're basically cooked. You had to stare at him the entire time and try to bait him out and play mind games. And doing that against a 3-hit character, I mean, you get parried once, you're pretty much dead. You have to be on the defense, and mind you, back in the day, your stamina values were quite minuscule in comparison to now. People's stamina, they don't cost as much, and every single input, getting parried, throwing out attacks, costed a bunch of stamina. Just so much stamina that it was impossible to even try to bait stuff out against a Lawbringer. If you see in the footage here, I'm doing my best trying to feint. He's getting some nasty parries. I am almost dead with just a couple parries, and without the intuition or the matchup knowledge against a Lawbringer, Aramusha versus Lawbringer, you're pretty much cooked, because this guy could probably parry my deadly feints, which are only 4 MS, and those are really easy to parry because there's no 100 MS hidden indicator back in the day. So For Honor was a turtle league game, so the react hards had the upper hand, and I had decent reactions when For Honor did come out. My reaction time was probably like 180 or 190 back in the day. Now it's like 200 on average. I can still get 190, but I have to be like super duper focused, and I just don't want to try that hard anymore for Honor because it's mostly just read based, even though 90% of the game is reactable. However, with Lawbringer, I had to be so careful. It was all about parries. And look at this guy. This guy's barely attacking me. He is just trying to go for all the parries, but look at all the damage he has already done, and I had to wait out. I had to bait out that top light. I had to bait out literally everything, and this was why he had to get reworked. Shove on block was toxic, and there was just not necessarily anything you could do about it. It was just a really toxic playstyle. In this point of For Honor, people were tired of characters not having any viable offense. They were tired of not being able to GB people because your GBs would whiff. Everyone kind of had T-Rex arms, especially my boy Aramusha. And people wanted their mix-ups to attack. They didn't want their turn to end. And when you look at For Honor right now, when you get into your chain offense, you have a ton of pressure and a ton of chain offense with stamina values that can keep letting you attack. When it comes to a Lawbringer, this character made you feel like crap. He absolutely destroyed you, and a lot of people loved playing this character. They just absolutely loved it. One important thing too to realize is that when you see a character faint, there is that smoke there. You see that smoke? That smoke tells the person who is trying to react to the animation that this person has fainted, so don't go for an attack. So a lot of players, high-level players, would just look at that smoke animation and be like, okay, now I'm not gonna parry anymore, right? There's no need to parry because he might GB. And so that made it so players could just simply wait and react. And that was one of the most egregious things when you fought a high-level player. He would just literally parry 90% of the things that you threw if he was just reacting. And there was a ton of react hards that I did fight back in the day. They were not that fun, I'm not gonna lie to you, especially using an Armush. If you see a different character that had some decent neutral pressure, then it would have been a little bit more of an enjoyable experience. But when you're playing Armush, it was absolutely horrible. Even playing as Lawbringer didn't feel the greatest, especially if you were not getting good parries. And that's why it felt so rewarding to play Lawbringer, because every single parry you did actually mattered, and it deleted the opponent's health bar. There's nothing more satisfying than nuking an opponent, and a lot of players love doing that. We love nuking someone else so that their day is just miserable. For Honor players are absolutely one of the most miserable players out there. That's the fact right there. That is honestly a fact. And playing Lawbringer definitely felt that way. If you also didn't see before too, Lawbringer had an incredibly weird tech where he could target, or he could change his guard on his unblockable. It looks so jank. Oh my gosh. High-level Lawbringer players would do that so much. It was so disgusting. The animation was really messed up. I mean, there's a lot of messed up animations back in the day, like so much that was egregious to deal with. A lot of people would abuse that. They would just call it tech. With Lawbringer, you had to use everything that you had in your tool because you didn't have any offense. You were purely all defensive based. You were unlock spamming. You were unlock running to get your impale and getting some quick damage in. And you're fighting near walls so you can get as much damage potential as possible. Now, it's kind of like Centurion as well. Honestly, I did not think it was fun fighting Lawbringers, man. It was not that fun fighting. It was fun playing, but, you know, that's the philosophy that I use. If the character is fun to play as, but not fun to play against, my goodness, that is a horribly designed character that you probably want to commit Sudoku as soon as you load up the match. If you see a Lawbringer out of the side, you're out. Like, if you know he's a parry god and you're not picking a good character yourself, you are out of there and you should just leave. But For Honor was just a different breed back in the day. It was a different breed. Like, just people would just stare at you and you would just get shoved on block. It was just a horrible experience, but there's no other game like it. There was literally no other game like it, and it was enjoyable to the highest degree. I sound like someone in Stockholm Syndrome saying two things at once, but you know, you can say two things at once and both of them be true, right? They can both be true. Just seeing him not being able to counter guard break after that heavy feint is just so funny to me. For Honor was absolutely a clown show. Did you see that mix up that I do? Did you see that mix up? So I go for a blockade. The only way to open a Lawbringer players is to go for the neutral blockade from neutral, like no indicator whatsoever, and then they will try to GB you on miss, and then you can use a light attack right afterwards. You can use a light attack if they could not react fast enough. And most players, when they look at it, they're like, whoa, why did you do a random blockade? Let's try to GB him, try to punish him. But I buffer the light attack. I can also buffer a heavy attack too, but it can be a little bit risky, but at the same time, like, it's also very powerful to someone who is simply just waiting for lights, and they won't expect a random blockade, right? So probably the most optimal play would be to go for a heavy attack, since Armush's heavy attacks are basically GB invulnerable. So that's one of the secret ways that I opened Lawbringers up back in the day. As you can see, how to break turtles using Armush is to spam the blockade from neutral, no indicators, and then go for your mix-up afterwards because they think it's their turn. They could just light you afterwards, but I think you have enough time to go back into your guard just to block the attack. So they go for a guard break instead. Come April 25th, 2019, they finally show off Raider and Lawbringer rework. Lawbringer rework, this is when they removed shove on block. Shove on block is gone right here. They removed it. People were complaining about it, had no real purpose, stopped offense, and was incredibly toxic. Had a cool looking animation, but he still keeps it on his forward dodge and his side dodge bashes. And mind you, Lawbringer, they still kept that hyper armor bash that had really good option selecting tools. However, it didn't have the greatest startup. It was really slow. You could easily dodge it, but it had amazing recovery, so you couldn't even punish him afterwards with the guard break. One thing I remember people talking about and suggesting was that Lawbringer could have had a breaker or a pushback option like once every 10 or 15 seconds, because Shigoki also, he had a hyper armor passive that would come back after, I think it was like 5-6 seconds or something like that, because Mortal Kombat had this tool that would break combos when an opponent was absolutely shredding them and they didn't have a chance, so it just allowed them to get some pressure off of them, and Lawbringer having that shove on block could push them away, and that'd be a neat thing for a turtle god. But that's just one idea I had while I was thinking about what could we have done to keep shove on block. And like I said, not everything needs to be kept on a character, because sometimes the move is just so toxic and it breaks the game, such as shove on block. But if we kept it like once every 10 seconds, or maybe you've got a light parry, then you're allowed to use shove on block, you know, that'd be kind of neat, because I don't think a character has prerequisites like that. Besides Shigoki being able to guard break literally everything because he has hyper armor, I mean, that's just one of the broken things about pre-CCU For Honor. But I will say one unique thing that came after was when they buffed Peacekeeper to give her enhanced light attacks if the opponent is bleeding, and change your finisher heavy to become an unblockable mix-up. So I thought that was a pretty neat idea, having prerequisites to get to a certain higher mix-up if they were bleeding, or if you got multiple parries, things like that. They still kept his 400 MS top light, and his chain one was also 400 MS, so that character still had good interrupting tools. For Honor was a lot about interrupting, zone option selecting, and playing incredibly defensive. They just made it so his chains felt a little bit better to use, and they finally gave him unblockable side heavies, which was really nice. He really needed it. And remember, he only had unblockables from the top with Ad Mortem, but now they gave him unblockable side heavies to make him a little bit more threatening, just a little bit more threatening. Even though most of his attacks were reactable, a lot of people were just gonna, they weren't gonna eat this. They weren't gonna eat. The animations were too telling. The smoke was way too telling. And he just got sped up overall. The characters basically got sped up. He got nerfed in the shove on block department, but had better offense and better chains to supplement his entire playstyle. So overall, this was a pretty decent buff for Lawbringer. You know, Lawbringer mains were eating, they were rejoicing, but the people who wanted to be like super toxic and just shove people all day, which is incredibly fun to do, you know, they were weeping. They were weeping on Reddit, they were crying, and we were enjoying it as Aramusha mains. I'm not gonna lie to you. One important thing too was that Lawbringer's side lights, they were about 600 MS if I recall. They were 600 MS, and in this buff, they finally improved it to 500. So this was just standard. I mean, this is still 100% reactable. You could block this 99% of the time. The 600 MS ones were incredibly easy to parry. That's why Lawbringers only threw the top one, because the top one was the fastest one. That's why Lawbringers would always unlock and then light, because the top one on default is 400 MS. It's their best light attack and one of the best tools to use in For Honor. I mean, Peacekeeper also had a 400 MS zone attack, was insane for option selecting. You had to be on your toes playing against that character. Same thing for Lawbringer. You had to watch out for that top light, because it literally could interrupt every mix-up that you do. And so they just made him stronger in that department, stronger in interrupting, stronger on playing defensively still, because he still kept his very large damage punishes. 3 parries and you're donezo. It's just a great time to be a Lawbringer main at this point in time. I'd like to also say that a lot of players were complaining about how this character had no hyper armor besides on his bash. They said that this is the character with all plate armor, and they're giving Raider all of this hyper armor instead. I mean, Raider back in the day was also a pretty weak character. He didn't really have that much going for him, so they decided to slap in a bunch of hyper armor, give him that variable time soft feint, which was improved. They also adjusted his zone so that it could be a little bit better, a little bit stronger, and adjust his damage values. But all that hyper armor went to the Vikings, whereas Lawbringer, he got no hyper armor, even though he's a full plate metal man. I mean, a full plate metal man having no hyper armor besides on his bash, which is pretty much useless in this point in time. It didn't become strong until later on when you can start option selecting everything. If you see here on the comment section, a lot of people were talking about Lawbringer's rework. They wanted faster lights. I mean, he already got 500 MS light attacks, but Raider had that 400 MS top light that was variable time. I think it was 500 actually. And everyone was crying about hyper armor, and I think a lot of people liked where he was going because they made him more of a chain heavy character. They improved everything about the character, and people obviously were upset that shove and block was removed because it was such a strong and cool defensive tool to push people off you. And since Ubisoft wanted to gravitate more towards an offensive meta, since so many characters were good defensively, they wanted to first start with Lawbringer, pretty much the poster child. I mean, Lawbringer is one of the most played characters in the game, next to like Warden and Orochi. Those three characters were pretty much defining how the game was. Lawbringer was the favorite because he was just, I mean, look at him. He's a polearm character in full plate armor. Everyone wanted him to be strong. Everyone wanted him to have hyper armor and also be really good defensively because the polearm is literally one of the best weapons in the entire world. And at this point, Hitakiri just came out. And if you don't remember Hitakiri, I will go over Hitakiri and why everyone hates her. But when she first came out, she's basically what she is now. She had neutral, heavy, hyper armor. So her neutral heavies would come out hyper armor instantly. And so you had to respect the crap out of her. You had to respect her. You had to parry her. Granted, a lot of things were more reactable, and people didn't know how to play the game as optimally, but she still was the heavy on red character, you know, heavy on this, heavy on that, had to respect it, had to go for parries, variable timed heavies, and all that good stuff. And so you had to respect that. And with Lawbringer not having any hyper on whatsoever, you were basically just kind of outclassed in that regard. But I mean, if you get parries like this, it doesn't even matter. You know, that's why Lawbringer had one of the highest win rates. I think he had the highest win rate during these seasons. I'm starting to remember the PTSD I got from Lawbringer receiving these buffs. I mean, the buff that he got, remember, he was able to have faster light attacks, and he still kept that neutral 400 MS neutral top light. That move, if you did not parry it, a Lawbringer would keep continuing to spam that every time. High level gamers, they would just use that, keep their guard top, they would unlock, they would just do that every single time. It was probably one of the most boring gameplay you would have ever seen. Like, you could tell if a Lawbringer is trying to have fun by throwing other moves, heavy feints and whatnot, but the most optimal Lawbringers, they would just stare at you. They would just stare at you, and then they would just top light you whenever they had an opportunity. And that was the entire character at high level. That was the entire character. He was so AIDS to fight against. The rework definitely helped him become a little bit more offensive, but he was quite annoying to deal with when you're in your chain pressure or just from neutral because of that 4MS lights. And 4MS lights were, you know, the openers back in the day. They weren't enhanced or anything, but they were incredibly fast. They were hayoi, like incredibly fast. And so you had to watch out for that every single fight, like every single time. Like, I didn't want to constantly be reacting to the red indicator on top. I didn't want to eat that top heavy too if I missed, because it's not like I'm gonna react every single battle. You know, I don't want to be reacting, looking at animations 24/7. You know me, we were read-based gamers, and we wanted to have fun with the game, go for nice heavy feints into parries, heavy feints into 4MS top parry, which I did. And you guys will see in some of these duels in the background that a lot of these players will just try to spam the 4MS top light, and it was just so boring to deal with, like incredibly boring to deal with, that you never really wanted to fight them again. You just wanted to leave. You just wanted to leave. You don't want to rematch them, dude. Like, those are the players that you want to just one and done, because they are so boring to play against, like so incredibly boring that it just ruins the game for you. It also ruins the character too, because when you play a character optimally, sometimes the character becomes unfun to play. You know, it's just absolutely unfun because of their one mechanic that makes them so overtuned that it just breaks the game. It honestly just breaks the game, and ruins the fun for every other person that plays, you know, that plays against you. You'll see with this guy, Akroza, I used to fight him all the time in duels, but he would just, he's just spamming the top lights, and I wanted to try parry it because I wasn't ready for it, but all he did was just light. The safest things ever, and if he didn't parry it, he would just continue to abuse it because he wanted to parry, he just wanted to spam the safest moves in the game. And at that point, I was like, okay, I realize your playstyle now. You just want to win. Like, that's a way you can have fun, sure, but I didn't want to play Lawbringer that way. When I played duels, when I made content, I wanted to like heavy feint spams. I want to try to bait people out, go for some really nasty parries. Sure, it's rewarding, and it's fun to see people just literally light parry everything, but it's also incredibly boring just to watch this playstyle, you know, just to watch this playstyle. And so I didn't really enjoy playing that way. Like, all he did was light. It was hilarious. It was also just super sad. Like, I was just trying to do some stupid stuff like dodge bashing to see what he would do, but obviously it's the slowest move in the game. You could obviously punish it incredibly easy. And so at this point, I just stooped to his level. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're just gonna stare at each other and go for light parries. and parry everything, go for the impale. You know, that's pretty much our game plan here when we fight another Lawbringer that is incredibly sweaty like that, or just literally just doing the same lights and lights over and over again. You know, you have to get those parries down. If you don't get those parries, then you're pretty much dead. As you can see, even though Lawbringer got buffed, he still is a character that requires you to play defensively. But you're playing offensively where you can only press that 4MS light attack. There's nothing else in the kit that actually makes him strong. It's simply this. This is one of his strongest neutral games. If you're not parrying anything that he does, then he gets away with it for free. And that was pretty much high level gaming. Like, you had to parry and you had to react. If you didn't react, then you're pretty much dead. It's just like, if I heavy feint, it doesn't matter. If I light from the side, it doesn't matter because there's no real pressure. And so if I don't go for parries, if I don't parry his zone option select, I thought he was dead there, but he wasn't. But if I don't parry his zone option select or his light attacks, then I lose. You know, I just lose. This is high level gaming, folks. Simply high level gaming. One move the entire time, unlocking, just abusing one mechanic until the other opponent is dead. And quite a great time For Honor was, right? Like, when people talk about how a pre-CC was amazing, I just show them some of these clips. There's a lot of good things about pre-CCU, but there's so much bad things too. Like, there's just so many bad things that can definitely outweigh the pros of the game. Like, unlocking simple moves like this, the 4MS neutral attacks were incredibly hard to deal with if you weren't a parry god, and if you didn't respect it, you just had to eat it all the time. It made For Honor have a really boring playstyle with certain characters. What I'd say to that was that if you played for fun, then I think pre-CCU was amazing. It was amazing for those players. If you played competitively and you wanted to win every single game, no matter what, by abusing the same moves over and over again, like this guy, just by doing top lights, which was the most abusable thing for Lawbringer if you didn't go for parries. Like, I'm trying to heavy feint and go for a parry, but I'm messing up my timings. That's one of the things. I'm also trying to dodge his top light when he does do it, to get some silly shenanigans in, but he just literally just keeps doing it. He just keeps doing it. And that's the only time. Like, if you don't bait him out, if you don't get those parries, then you're pretty much cooked. You have to play defensively. You have to get those parries with Lawbringer. You had to be a parry god. If you weren't a parry god, it was pretty much Gojo over. Honestly, just watching Lawbringer back in the day, it's just so funny, man. Like, he's so limited in his kit, but if you get some nasty parries, the guy just dies in like 3 hits. It's so hilariously bad that people thought this was a well-designed character. He was so annoying to deal with. Like, even a Gladiator player, remember, Gladiator he doesn't actually have offense in this game. He didn't have offense until when they sped up his chain bash and they improved his skewer. In this game, he's actually fairly weak. He had a lot of stamina damage. You can go for that toe step, but it was 100% reactable from neutral. So Lawbringer could just simply parry and then simply punish. Like, if you parry, he's dead. Like, literally every character is dead. His bashes were safe. He had good hyper armor. He had a fast 4MS top light, and he was just annoying to deal with, man. I kid you not. He definitely was a little bit hard to play if you weren't a reaction god and if you weren't sweating your ass off, because you had to get nice parries. But if you didn't get nice parries, you were pretty much throwing with Lawbringer. There's no value you're really getting. But then again, if you got like 3 good heavy parries, then you pretty much already won if there's a wall slide nearby. I mean, I am down 0-2 here, and I'm playing like crap. I don't think I'm getting any parries. I'm just no-brain. I'm just light attacking from random neutral. But if I get this heavy parry, boom, his entire HP pool is gone. It's literally gone, and now he has to respect and play my game, play super patiently, wait out for my light checks, my random light attacks, and I get a parry there, boom shakalaka, and then the BP is pretty much cooked. And BP was like a pretty decent character back in the day. He had really strong pressure, and he had a really good OS bug that I'll probably talk about later in a different video. But with Lawbringer, if you weren't playing on top of your game, it didn't matter as long as you got like a few heavy parries. It doesn't have to be light parries. If you got heavy parries, Lawbringer could win the game. Like, you could win the game. It was honestly kind of a free win if you just got heavy parries, which is why they had such high win ratios. But without pairing anything at all, then Lawbringer is a bad character. You know, no offense, no good strings, and just okay interrupt tools. This VP is trying to flip my top light, but it's so hard. You have to do it. You have to do it preemptively, and you have to do it on a read. Otherwise, you're gonna get hit by it. Like, you have to do it super duper early. You use so much stamina. If you get parried, you get punished for letting stuff fly. So that's why offense was so bad, because if you went for offense and if you just kept attacking and you got parried, you got punished, it wasn't your turn. and you'd lose all agency defensively and offensively. So that's why turtling was the best meta. Yeah, if you parried, you kept your stamina, and then you had to slow down. You couldn't just keep attacking. You had to play very safe. And this is Lawbringer Edition 2, right? This is one of his second reworks where he got buff. He got a few, like he probably gets like a few adjustments later on, but this is like the Lawbringer that's gonna stay for a while before he gets another big rework. This is where he starts changing and starts losing his toxic abilities on just becoming a parry god. A lot of people are gonna miss what he was right now because the damage that he gets is deleted from him. It's gone now because the game starts changing dramatically. The core combat update, which essentially changed For Honor forever. Whether you think it's good, whether you think it's bad, especially if you main certain characters that did high amounts of damage. I'm looking at you Lawbringer mains out there. This was good for the game. This was good for the game. There came a lot of bad things, but there was also so many good things that it outweighed the bad. And the Lawbringer got changed dramatically. A lot of characters got changed dramatically when it came to having offense and having a fun or fair play style with other characters and interacting with other characters in 4v4 and in 1v1. As you can see, I've mostly been talking about 1v1s, and 4v4 it's a completely different mode, and I was mainly a duelist back in the day, but having 4v4 characters just compete against one another, it was mostly just damage values. A lot of players would just simply keep throwing heavies and you would eat so much damage, you would die so quickly, but you would also get revenge really fast too, mind you. Like a lot of revenge, insanely quick, because the For Honor revenge system was it was pretty whack. Revenge was pretty strong. It was honestly really strong. There's also a build variety too within your gear stats. I don't want to go over to that too much, but if you look here, this is what they nerfed with Lawbringer. They pretty much deleted everything. They nerfed him like 2 different times on his impale. One time they nerfed it all the way to 10 damage, and they nerfed it again to 8 damage, and then they finally nerfed Lawbringer damage to 1 for the impale. So if you got a heavy parry, you would just get a 1 damage impale and landed a 24 damage. So it'd be 25 damage punish, but it still did the blind. The blind was still in here, and they didn't remove it until later on in his big rework, but this is one of the CCU changes that Lawbringer needed, and it made him deal a lot less damage. Still did more damage on above average than most characters, especially after a heavy parry. Like after a heavy parry, Lawbringer was still the king, still had a very high win ratio, simply because if you could parry, you would do all this damage. Now, look at the damage values. From 8, 32, top heavy, from 24, left heavy is 29, it went down to 24. Mind you, most characters in general had 30 damage neutral heavies to punish. Some characters had a little bit more, but they nerfed all these values down to 24 damage. Like absolutely insane. Look at this. Everyone lost basically, I'd say on average, like 10 damage on everything. Literally everything. Actually pretty insane, except for the light values. The light values are always weak, but the heavy attacks, like getting a light parry now is a lot less rewarding, but it also makes the fight last a little bit longer, so that there's more read-based gameplay, especially for like high-level games. The best way to actually beat your opponent and make sure that you're actually better than them is to have a prolonged fight. That's why people best out of 3s is not enough. You want to do like best out of 5 or best out of 10, and it's not best out of 5 or 3. Which is really important because you want to be able to read, you want to be able to adapt. The best player usually knows how to adapt and mind game their opponent much more so than the other, and they can adapt faster and they can adapt much quicker and punish them more severely. So with all these huge nerfs, my boy was pretty much still, unfortunately, not Turtle God. He's honestly still a god when it comes to punishing. So if you could parry, there's just no way that you're going to lose. Poor Lawbringer doesn't even have a light chain here. Light chain is just so helpful with Lawbringer. Just going back to light into heavy and having only that combo is just so sad. It's honestly incredibly sad that he hadn't got that chain for the longest time. After so many buffs that he had gotten, it was just so weird that he was never able to get those chains. And a lot of characters didn't have those chains either. It had to take an entire overhaul. I mean, look how much stamina they lose after one parry. That's why the CCU had to come. They had to revamp the entire stamina system so that people could actually attack. Without the CCU, we would just be we would just be doing 2 moves and never attacking. And some people like that, sure, but overall for the core gameplay, the gameplay loop, you have to be able to attack so you can actually learn what your opponent's gonna do and punish them accordingly. Just looking at them the entire time while only pressing 2 moves is so depressing. There's so many bad things about it that made you feel like shit. It honestly made you feel like shit playing a certain character. So this current Lawbringer probably feels like one of the most balanced out of the entire Lawbringer existence. He didn't have that very strong parry punish. It was about 25 damage, and then he had 24 damage neutral heavies. He had a very good, like insane recovery after his zone, and also on a dodge bash. So he felt very safe, so you could just dodge bash a lot of character mix-ups. He also had that hyper armor back in the day where you could just essentially just make sure you were safe from all mix-ups and go for nasty trades the entire time. So this Lawbringer didn't have the strongest neutral pressure, but he had very safe qualities about him that made it so that he was a little bit hard to kill. You had to actually focus him down with the perks that they added, Bastion, Vengeful Berry, and Last Stand. He was actually pretty strong when it came to being a good anchor. That zone attack with the really nice recovery was pretty much useless in all levels of play, but I liked using it just to go for some silly baits to punish certain characters that attack right away, because you could parry them if you had fast enough reactions, and depending on what move they use, you could go for some really nice parries if you want a light there, if they want a heavy. You could also just dodge bash to keep yourself safe, because remember, the dodge bash has an incredible recovery. It was pretty much unpunishable next to a character like Jianhu. Jianhu can actually punish it because they have forearm as dodge attacks, but they were also a really weak character, and they also had a really sick deflect, if you guys remember that. He had that palm strike, or the palm strike that he had right now for neutral opener. That's what they used. It was so freaking cool to see him use that move, and also stun, but now it doesn't do much anymore, it just guarantees damage. And that's kind of what Ubisoft does. They take like really niche things about a character and they just streamline the crap out of it and then make it like, oh, this character's strong now, so we don't have to touch him anymore, let's just make him strong and not unique anymore. So he still keeps his 30 damage heavy parry punishes, which is like so lackluster in comparison to the 50 damage, but it's still one of the highest damage punishes in the game. Lawbringer just consistently keeps getting his damage tuned down over the years because his parry punishes are still so good. He still gets that impale after heavy parry, so overall his average damage values are higher than the entire cast if you can get some parries, and that makes him quite a threat, even though he still has no real offense, and his chains are okay. He still keeps the forearm as light attacks, but I'm sounding like a broken record here. Let's start moving on to when he actually changes into a completely different character that is unrecognizable to the For Honor player base, and honestly pisses off a lot of players. I'm going over this video. This is when Lawbringer first came out, and I made this edit where Homelander just looking at the screen. He's just in doubt. He can't believe this is happening, and he's just zoned out. He is what's the word? It's not bipolar, but he is isolating himself, or using I forgot what it's called. What's the word called? Help me out here. Where he disassociates. He disassociating himself in the theater. And that's how pretty much all Lawbringer mains felt like. They felt like, what has happened to my main? But with this rework, this is a testing grounds, mind you. So this is the testing grounds where all the players were able to test out. Ubisoft started adding testing grounds where they put in changes, like very big changes, like overpowered changes. They said they did overpowered changes on purpose to see how it interacted with the rest of the characters. And so for this iteration of Lawbringer, quite a list to go through. Basically, they gave him a chain bash that's feintable, and it looks so jank. They also gave him triple chain lights, as you can see here. And I said that the animation looked good. Watch this. I said that the animation looked good.
I mean, that looks pretty good.
But now that I'm looking back at it, I was definitely coping. I was just way too happy to see Lawbringer getting actual triple chain lights. Now, we never really asked for triple chain lights. I don't think any high level, well, I'd say like maybe some high level players actually ask for the triple chain lights, because that's a really good tool to have, because you could actually put on some pressure and make it so that, oh, so this guy's might throw a light attack, I'm gonna go for a parry, but you throw a heavy, you eat 26 damage heavies for Lawbringer. And so having triple chain lights was monumental for the character, just having strings in general, because remember, Lawbringer can only do a light into heavy, or light into heavy into light, or heavy, 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 or heavy, light, and light. So he didn't have that much pressure when it comes to chain offense. Like from the neutral, going for your light attack is your safest tool, because this is when they started to give him enhanced lights. Now the enhanced lights, he did not have that before. Whenever you did a light attack, it would bounce off, and especially when you had that 4MS chain, 4MS top light, it just bounced off. But the good thing was it was safe and it was 4MS. But now they nerfed it. They nerfed the character so that he doesn't have that neutral 4MS light attack. No more 4MS light attacks for Lawbringer. So they only had 500 MS light attacks from the top and the left and the right. So what they did was they improved and they enhanced his side lights so that he could go into a chain heavy. But the thing is, the chain heavy is not a good opener because a lot of people will block that, and the blocking would be nice, but a lot of people would just parry it. And then you had to go into your unblockable heavy finishers, which had issues on its own. The unblockable heavy finisher was a decent unblock because it could hit people who would dodge. But the thing is that now Lawbringer, in this rework, he was able to go into a light, or just a light, heavy, which is really nice. You can get into an unblockable finisher much quicker. Before, you had to go for parry to go into an unblockable finisher right away. But this is such a big change because when they added this version, you go into unblockable right away. Like after a parry, boom, go right into unblockable heavy with the tap. Before, you had to go into a repose, which is the tap, and then go into a chain heavy, and then go into unblockable heavy, or you could do the tap into a chain light into unblockable heavy. So there was a lot of steps before you could actually get into a strong chain pressure. But now that he has the unblockable straight up, it makes him so scary for people who can't react to the unblockable mix-up. And I'm looking back at it, and the triple chain light, completely unnecessary in my opinion. And the thing is that they actually listened, but they listened like way too far, and they just like removed it outright. Like people wanted 2 chain light attacks, but they removed it altogether in the next testing grounds. But let's just quickly go over the rework for the first testing grounds for Lawbringer. Now, as you saw, he had that chain bash that was feightable, and so that animation was abomination. But the neat thing was that it gave him much more pressure than just an unblockable mix-up, because chain bashes by itself are mostly unreactable, especially the ones that are animations are really jank, like that one, you know, like super duper jank. They also buffed his long arm so that you could continue your mix-up and not be interrupted, because beforehand, every single time you use your long arm, you throw a heavy, you could get lighted out of the next move instantly. Another important thing about Lawbringer that they adjusted and fixed was that they nerfed his impale to a significant degree, like actually nerfed it to a significant degree. If you look here, you're only able to get 21 damage, like 21 damage, and the animation, they changed it. It looks really weird. They made the chain heavy come out right afterwards, which is nice. Like you get a 20 damage follow-up, and then the impale does 1 damage, which is above average. It is above average, at least compared to the cast that can't get wall splats or very strong heavy parry punishes. Like Afira still gets a shit ton, Centurion still gets a crap, Warmonger also still gets 30 damage, but Lawbringer, he was like the parry specialist, the parry god, the turtle god. And since they nerfed this aspect about him, having 21 damage is not that bad, especially when you knew that Ubisoft philosophy was lowering damage values and increasing more chain pressure. That's why Lawbringer got so many adjustments here with the feightable bash, a very strong unblockable heavy that goes into a bash again, back over and over and over again with bash mix-ups and unblockable mix-ups, enhanced lights, making him become a more of an offensive house than a defensive house. And a lot of people didn't really like that. A lot of people were angry that the character started to lose his identity. You know, the day Lawbringer lost his identity, which is a parry specialist and a defensive god. A parry specialist isn't necessarily, I'd say, a unique thing to Lawbringer. Every character can parry and get good damage values, but I would say the character had more of like a follow-up specialist. You know, there's different things you could do. You can impale, you could tap, you could forward dodge bash, you could just do a neutral light attack, and now when you impale, you can either do a long arm or go into a top heavy with the stun and go into a follow-up light. So there's just so many options for Lawbringer. He was the mix-up parry, he was the mix-up follow-up specialist, you know, or just a follow-up specialist that made it so that if you got parried, there were so many things Lawbringer can do. You could have so much fun with it. You could have so much fun and do so many crazy shenanigans that it felt like a character that had an incredible amount of options compared to the cast. Like compared to Orochi gets a parry, he gets a light, he gets a zone, he gets a forward dodge bash. That's about it. Like that's 3 options. That's why people enjoy Centurion so much, because he gets insane looking animations on his parry follow-ups. He gets that follow-up knee into a punch. He gets a wall slap mechanic. He can do forward forward dodge bash, light attack, and he could also do parry follow-up. He could do the triple guard breaks. There's just a lot of things. I mean, not triple guard breaks, so he could do the triple smack in the face into a wall split to finisher heavy. Like, that's why a lot of people like those characters. Very strong parry specialist and mix-up follow-up specialist characters. I also don't want to forget to mention that they removed the ability to long arm after impale in this testing grounds rework. Absolutely disgusting. One of the most fun and great looking animations for Lawbringer, and gave some use to long arm besides using it from neutral, because we are so funny. I mean, being Lawbringer and using long arm is my entire personality, and they decide to remove that altogether. Absolutely a shameful display, in my honest opinion. So I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of Lawbringer players, were absolutely pissed. They were pissed. One of the reasons you did this in 1v1s was to assert dominance, and it looked hilarious. In 4v4, it's really good for ganking. So if you get a heavy parry, you can get a long arm, and then boom shakalaka, the enemy is pinned, and they don't reduce, they don't get any damage reduction whatsoever. So the next heavy attack that comes, it's just an instant full damage, which is super duper strong, but it takes so long to get into. The long arm itself, ganks are good because they're fast. So if it's a very slow gank like Highlander Caber Toss, even though Highlander Caber Toss is actually really good, since it takes so long and it feeds revenge all the way for sure, it's not a really good gank. So Lawbringer having this really niche gank, it's not a bad thing, and they just removed it all right together, and I don't know why. And in this version, a lot of people, I'd say most of them, were relatively happy, besides the fact that he had hyper armor and everything. He had hyper armor on his chain heavies and his finisher heavies, which is, it was broken. It was broken. And I don't think any person with a brain, even people on Reddit, thought that this was balanced. So Ubisoft just wanted to test it out, and I don't know why, because any good player would have been like, yeah, hyper armor and everything is a bad idea, especially when a character has like so many tools. Like on Raider, it's fine because his literally the only tool that he has is that 4MS soft feint stunning tap, which doesn't really storming tap, mind you. I'm sorry, I'm still stuck in the pre-CCU era. We called it stunning tap because it's stunned. And with Lawbringer, he had so many options. Very fast bash, very good forward bash too, because his forward bash is now, it's now 500 MS. So the forward bash would make it so that you could actually punish, or you could actually have offense. You could have offense now. And this is a little bit before the rework, actually. So his forward dodge bash was really good. His forward, I mean, it wasn't like amazing, but he at least had a forward dodge bash that could deal OOS pressure. And that was really helpful for him, like really helpful. I didn't mention that beforehand, but that's the only tool that he really had. So it wasn't really that strong. But in conjunction with all of these buffs, the hyper armor, the new changes for his impale, the changes of getting into unblockable mix super fast, it made Lawbringer a powerhouse. Lawbringer was the king in this rework, and it made him disgusting to play. Absolutely disgusting. You felt like the strongest character. You honestly did. And if Lawbringer was the strongest character, honestly, I wouldn't really mind, because, I mean, look at him. He's a freaking goated, chatted individual. Just looking at that bashing gun looks so bad. I can't believe it wasn't the finished product. It was a placeholder, and I get that, but the crazy thing is that nobody asked for this bash. Nobody asked for it. The unblockable heavy mix-up was already a pretty solid mix, even to like high-level players. It was a really hard move to consistently react to, but you guys will see that this character actually becomes even more powerful than ever before with more changes to his kit. You know, this Lawbringer truly is one of the characters of all time. Honestly, one of the characters of all time. One really nice buff too is that they made the unmortem inamikus, they made that soft feintable. So if you got into your chain mix-up, it would be soft feintable and be much easier to catch people who would try to dodge early. So this was incredibly helpful. Soft feints in general really helped Lawbringer become super freaking strong when it came to like having players that would just dodge all the time with it. So that unblockable top heavy did so much damage, and it was all soft feintable. So it was incredibly good for him just to have soft feint abilities to make it so that you don't have to like hard feint everything, because hard feinting, you don't get as much time to get away from the mix-up, and that's a good thing. Oh my god, dude, just looking at all that hyper armor just makes 0 sense to me, man. Just literally 0 sense. It's actually so cringe that it drives me insane. So as you can see there, that dodge bash was not able to evade my hyper armor finisher in the finisher itself was scary because if you got hit by that, you would go into the mix-up again and again because he had that feintable chain bash. He had so many cool, very big hitbox heavy attacks now with hyper armor, and the hyper armor is the scariest part. Literally the scariest part because you couldn't do anything. You had to respect it. Any character with hyper armor, you had to respect. It was incredibly hard to deal with, especially with it just Oonga Booging. Like I said, hyper armor makes and breaks a character. It makes so that the character that you're fighting against, you have to respect it. If he didn't have hyper armor, he would be a lot less threatening. It didn't matter if he had unblockable heavies or not. If he had hyper armor, it would be strong. It would honestly just be strong. I mean, seeing Lawbringer in action with all that hyper armor, it honestly makes me miss Lawbringer right now because personally, I think Lawbringer's live character iteration, it's not even as fun as the one we have right now. I don't even want to play Lawbringer. And we'll talk about Lawbringer's second testing grounds and his final iteration. So the second one was quite a big deal. And mind you, I think one of the most important things is that they never added a roll catcher for Lawbringer. In this big rework, a rework where they're testing new things and testing a character how to be stronger, they didn't even add a roll catcher, which has been asked for since the dawn of time. For the past 8 years that For Honor's been out, everyone's been asking for it, and they decided that, let's just give him like a weird chain bash that nobody asked for. He already had a chain bash. If you didn't react to it, you could just also empty. If people just empty dodge, you could just guard break. It'd be a really nice punish, like a really nice punish. But everyone's asking for roll catchers, and they just like, let's just give triple lights, like really jank triple light animations, and this super jank chain bash too. Who cares? But like I said, there's a lot of good thing too, because the zone can change. Long arm is safe after landing a heavy attack. You can also go into a parry repose, that zone that does a hyper armor and also is unblockable. You can go into a chain now with the light or the chain heavy attack and go into your finisher. And as my boy Strikeforce says here, there's just too much hyper armor, way too much hyper armor. The new bash is horrible, and he gets that follow-up tap after a heavy attack, which was such a weird thing to do because I get why they did it, because they wanted to enter his chain bash much faster. But now it just kind of felt like Griffin. Now, both those characters, when the Griffin came out, it kind of felt like Lawbringer because they have the same tap animation. It's pretty much the same tap animation. It was really weird that they decided to do that. Honestly, I didn't really like that, and I don't think Lawbringer needed that except for on the finisher. See that finisher right there? He's able to get that nice tap. But when you compare those two characters, they're fairly similar in the animation department. And similar animation is not the end of the world, because you can still have a character be unique with like a few of the same attacks. Like look at Tekken, there's a lot of universal low attacks, universal jabs that don't make or break the character, as long as they have like very cool unique animations that don't really change the character too much or make the character feel the same. And as you can see here, the Lawbringer testing grounds changed so much things about him. They removed the stun, they changed impale altogether. They also changed his back throw distance. He used to have the best back throw distance, but now it's only to 5 from 10, so double the amount before. You could get some nasty throws with it. It was actually insane, but now you can't do it anymore, which was a little bit sad. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, changing that, having him have that unique aspect with this throw distance was pretty cool, but removing it altogether, Ubisoft doesn't like fun, right? They don't like fun. But removing the stun altogether on the character, the blind, on the top heavies that you used to get from the neutral and the chain, and the finisher, Immortum, like pretty crazy, like huge changes from my boy. They just decided to remove anything that ruined the UI experience of other players, which I kind of understand because you don't know what's going on. But I mean, you're getting hit by a top heavy, a very strong top heavy, and those were all blockable. So why are we removing that when they got hit by that? Because landing a heavy attack, getting a light parry, it's a little bit harder than just taking that to the face without blocking. Now, unfortunately, they also decided to remove impale on heavy parry. Quite frankly, the saddest thing I have ever seen in the entire game. I'm not gonna lie, even more sad than my Aramusha getting changed altogether. I kid you not. And you guys know I love my Aramusha, but removing this on Lawbringer on a heavy parry is just this. It brings tears. It's enough to bring tears to a grown man's eyes. It changed me forever inside. Lawbringer and Ubisoft changed me forever. I now have imposter syndrome. I have PTSD thinking about this. I can't even finish making this video. They removed it all together. And so as you can see there, you can only get it on a light parry. they just removed it altogether. In Testing Grounds phase 1, you were able to get your 21 damage impale on a heavy, which was nice. I mean, lowering the damage was nice. Personally, if they lowered down to like even 18, I would have been okay with that. That chain heavy follow-up that they gave Lawbringer, if it did 18 damage or 17 damage with the follow-up impale doing 1 damage, I'd be okay with that, because I personally liked playing Lawbringer for all the choices that he is able to get, like all of them. But removing that impale on heavy parry, quite a disgusting change. A lot of players did not like that at all. They did not like that. People were pissed. Like, people were actually pissed. I will show you guys. People did not like it. This here is more of a team fighter. Everyone's so he's boring now. Pretty much, yeah. On the toilet right now, blowing up a mad storm. Cool vid. Thank you so much, brother. Oh man, seeing the add more hit for 25 or damage hurts the soul. We did get that follow-up. This man did not know. There goes the unique factor of one of the most fun characters in the game. I totally agree with that. The impale into wall after heavy parry, I'm gonna miss it. I mean, everyone kind of does. I feel like taking away the impale from heavy parry is a little bit too much. It's like, it's his iconic move. I agree with that. It's like taking away Nut Slam from Lawbringer. Just nerf the damage, but let it still be available. Exactly my point, Alabama Trobel. This guy probably doesn't even play the game anymore. You know, I don't even think they played him anymore. No problem, guys. The devs know what's best for this game. I mean, they can't even parry a heavy attack. What could go wrong? Sometimes I can't even parry heavy attacks, okay? Sometimes I can't even parry heavy attacks. Let's not give them slack on that regard. Let's not give them slack there. As a level 63 Lawbringer, I just can't understand taking away a signature move like this. Nerf the damage a little if you have to, but don't take away the impale from us. Yeah, impale after light parry, it's crazy because when you do impale after light parry, it doesn't even matter. Like, it doesn't even matter because the ad mortem already does way more damage. Why would you waste more time on a light parry? Like, on a heavy parry, it makes sense. But this is kind of counteracting my options or my philosophy of, you know, he gets so many different punishes, you know, but on a heavy parry, you only get a few punishes. Like, they remove the ability to get the most consistent punishes. Heavy parries are probably the most consistent parries you can get because they're slower. A lot of high-level players will say, why did you parry that heavy? Or why did you go for the parry? Well, it's slower. Duh. That's why I went for the parry, you fucking pizzle. If I go for a light parry, then you know, I might eat a heavy, or I'm just too slow. I'm way too slow, bro. Like, I don't have time to be looking at the animations 24/7 playing 99 rounds of duels with one of my boyfriends. Yeah, I don't have time to do that. I'm gonna parry slow moves, you know? That's the average player. That's the average front runner player. The player that doesn't want to stare at the screen super close, 2 inches from the monitor. The reason is so that we can get some cool punishes on heavy parries, but now we only get that cool punish on a light parry, which is somewhat a little bit more satisfying. However, it's a lot less frequent, even though lights got sped up, even though we had that 100 ms hidden indicator change. It's a lot less common. You're just not able to get it that often. And having a bunch of different options on heavy parry, which is the most consistent parry, it just had a lot more pizzazz to it. Now on a light parry, there's 2 options. Like, why would you go for a less damaging option that takes more stamina, needs a wall behind you, instead of just going for the ad mortem? Ad mortem does 30 damage. It's the highest damage punish. And you get into your chain mix-up afterwards. Whereas the where you impale and do a top heavy, lot less damage, or you go into impale into a long arm, a lot less damage, takes more time in 4v4, in 1v1s. You never see it. I have never seen, I barely ever, I'm not gonna say I've never seen it, but I've barely ever seen a Lawbringer do a light parry into an impale unless there is a legendary buy, and that doesn't really happen that much either. So it's kind of a crazy change, a big change that changed the character to a significant degree, I feel like when you do this, you take away the ability to have player choice and player agency. It's also as if Centurion lost his ability to knee follow-up after a heavy parry, and he only was allowed to use that on a light parry. Like, imagine that. Centurion, I don't think he'd be as fun. Like, what would you do after a heavy parry? You would just do a light attack. That is so boring, like absolutely incredibly boring. That character is one of the most popular characters for a reason, okay? Because he has so many different tools that you can choose and use whenever you want on heavy parry or even a light parry. The zones are one of the most common tools used, especially if they're 500 ms or even 600 ms. You're gonna be trying to parry those as much as possible because they're the safest moves to throw out and they're also quick. So the person person throwing out the zone won't regret it as much, but the person parrying at least gets to use some really cool, unique animations to get into their mix-up. If you're also looking at the background, Lawbringer can now use his zone more than one time, an actual ginormous change of being able to reduce that stamina cost for the zone is monumental. And with this change too, mind you, being able to not get raw damages, like a 24 damage neutral heavy, as you can see here, his neutral heavy damage is, I believe it is 20 damage. So it's a 20 damage heavy attack. A 20 damage heavy attack, so his damage values on his max punish got reduced significantly. Well, 23 actually, because 23 due to the top heavy being so slow. So they nerfed his damage significantly. It used to be 24 plus 26 for his max parry punish into a follow-up top light, but that was unsafe. But they nerfed his damage outright altogether, so a pretty freaking insane change for the character. So just they nerfed damage values, they nerfed impale, and they also took away his hyper armor on his finisher heavies, which was a really good change, mind you. That's a really good change. I'm not gonna lie, dude, the devs deserve prop for that one, but they already knew that it was gonna be overpowered. See, as you can see here, like I'm trying to do it off of muscle memory, but it's impossible. Like losing that, I felt like I lost a part of me. As a Lawbringer man, I'm sure you guys can attest to that. Like losing that impale punish on a heavy parry hurt me so deeply that I will forever remember this. I will forever remember what Ubisoft has done to our boy here. I am honestly so upset that they took that away from me. It was so sad. It's a traumatic experience that I'm hoping that my psychiatrist can help me with. I think Marvel Rivals did, to be honest. Oh my god. Oh, also at one point, I just realized at 1.2, they removed the enhanced side lights. They removed the enhanced side lights because he was able to get triple chain lights, and of course they walked that back anyways. They walked that back entirely, where he wasn't able to get any chain lights at all. Like they removed the chain lights. It's so stupid. You had to go back into a heavy attack, which is the weirdest decision ever. On the testing grounds too, mind you. The testing ground, they removed the 2 chain lights. Like as you see here, I'm not doing light into light. I'm doing light into heavy. And I don't know why they removed it. It was so stupid. I honestly am so baffled. I'm honestly so baffled. The decision making in testing grounds, I don't know what feedback they're looking into, because when you finish the testing grounds, they give you the option to do a survey, and you have to like talk about like all the changes that you experience, all the fights. Is the character strong? Or like, what do you guys think about the changes so far? But removing that double chain light, I don't know who asked. I think people didn't want the triple chain light, and they wanted the double chain light into a heavy, which was what I also wanted. I didn't think he needed the triple chain light. The triple chain light was definitely a little bit overkill, and it was a little bit counterintuitive to their design philosophy, because during that time period, they removed Orochi's triple chain light, but then they added Lawbringer's triple chain light. So it's so weird. Like the balancing decision behind doing these testing grounds was so off-putting that it was just so inconsistent on their changes. Like it didn't make any sense. Like why would you remove Orochi's triple chain lights even though they weren't even like 4 MS anymore when you just add it for Lawbringer? It makes 0 sense to me. Like actually 0 sense. And that's essentially Lawbringer's Testing Grounds Rework 1 and number 2. And it took them, I think it took them like a couple of months, like maybe 3 months or 4 months to finish the rework. The rework itself was quite a painful journey for the Ubisoft devs, I'm sure. Like they didn't know what to do with them at all. There was so much feedback for this character, because this character, if you fucked him up, people were not going to be happy. You know, people are not going to be happy, because this is one of the OG characters that needed some buffs. They did some crazy changes, and some of the changes were quite questionable. Like they were just so questionable that I had no idea what was going to happen with the character. Like just no idea. And I played the character religiously for such a long period of time. And that's just one of the greatest things about Ubisoft, is that you never know what they're going to do. You honestly never know what they're going to do. And we honestly don't, because the final iteration of Lawbringer's rework, they didn't give us a third testing ground. They simply just released it, and by gum, were we surprised. I surely was surprised, because here's what they did. They decided it was best to allow you to use your chain bash after every single light attack. Before, you could pretty much just do it after every single heavy, but now if you press a light attack, boom, you can go straight up into a 500 ms bash. Now this is going to be a lot more reactable than going for the heavy into bash mix-up, because you have an unblockable heavy attack. People will just try to react to the animations, but most people aren't. I'm not going to be doing this. I'm not that sweaty, but there are people that can do it. But for the unblockable heavy attack, this is going to be very hard, because people look on the animation. If he moves, he twitches, boom. But if you dodge and there's an unblockable heavy coming at you, you're going to get eaten by that. That thing is going to do so much damage to you. So they allow you to do a bash after every single light. They remove the triple chain light attacks, which is just fine. They gave Lawbringer a roll catcher, but one important thing too is that they didn't give this roll catcher to Lawbringer until a couple months afterwards. And this roll catcher is so ridiculously looking. It has the weirdest hitbox due to the animations. The animations, the attack will sometimes come out before it will hit register, before the animation fully follows through. It is so weird. A lot of people thought that they were going to use the impale animation with the forward dodge heavy, but they just went for forward dodge heavy and increased the range and the momentum of the move, so it looks a lot slower. It does roll catch from time to time. I'd say at least he has a roll catcher, but it looks so jank, I kid you not. It's one of the craziest looking roll catchers I've ever seen, and they took months to do this. They took months. They also decided to remove the new animation that they worked so hard on. The first iteration of the animation was an abomination, but they actually made the animation look really nice and made it so that he had offensive pressure besides just going into your unblockable or just using that forward dodge 500 ms bash. Thing is, a lot of people didn't ask for this, but this is an unreactable mix-up that would have helped Lawbringer. But you'll soon come to see that Lawbringer has pretty much shot up to S tier with this new rework, because being able to bash after every single light attack and having that new roll catcher is insane. And with the final iteration of Lawbringer 3.0, we've lost impale on heavy parry. The impale still looks incredibly jank and slow. You can only get it on a light parry. The neat thing is that they actually did buff Lawbringer's top heavy to deal more damage, so that the heavy is so slow it might as well deal a lot more damage than his side heavies. Another good change that they actually did was that they decided to change the neutral heavies back to 22 damage and then his follow-up tap to 4. Before, it used to be 20 neutral damage for the heavy and then the tap would be 5, so it'd be 25 damage total. But they decided to increase his damage overall, since he used to be a hard hitter, that is, and he still is, but now he gets 26 damage on a guard break, which is really high in comparison to other casts, which gets 24. Some characters get a little bit more, like 25, like Kensei, but at least Lawbringer gets his high value on a guard break punish. And I guess they did decide to buff impale to 3 more damage, so if you get a light parry, you could do an impale for 3, go for a top heavy 23 damage plus another 2 for the wall splat. So there is some positive, especially if you're deciding to go for a wall splat on throw. I think on light parry, it doesn't really make sense to do this still, but on a throw punish, if you want the max amount of damage, you will go for the throw on a wall splat and then use long arm and go for your top heavy into your follow-up tap, and that'll deal 25 damage, because the side heavies, they buffed it to 22 and then the top one is 25, so deal a little more damage. Addition to the 4 is going to be 29 damage total for a guard break punish if they are near your wall. So he does get high damage potential if you can follow up with that damage, and if you remember that combo. And I believe that's pretty much the character we have right now in 2025. Now granted, they did nerf Juggernaut, which used to have 50% damage reduction and hyper armor, but they reduced it down to 20%. This doesn't change my playstyle or the character that much. It just kind of nerfs everybody who had Juggernaut. You're not going to be as tanky, and you can't just randomly, willy-nilly throw heavies around 24/7. And I run Righteous Deflection anyways, because I am a Chad who loves going for parries and getting rewarded for it. You get that 50% damage reduction just like Juggernaut, but you don't get the added benefit of hyper armoring through everything. So the question is, was old Lawbringer, Shove and Block Lawbringer, better to play than what we have currently right now in this current meta? And the answer to that is quite simple, actually. Shove and Block Lawbringer was not the better character. I think he was fun in some aspects, but he had a lot of toxic traits to him. It was incredibly satisfying to get 50 damage light parries. You get so much damage on a heavy parry. Pretty much it's like 60 or more. I'm not gonna lie to you, it was the optimal play. And you just felt like a total badass and a wonking tank, shoving people around. I think if you enjoy that playstyle, if you enjoy that bully playstyle like Jormungandr, pre-rework Jormungandr, where he was simply a stamina bully, I think you love the character. And I really did too. I'm not gonna lie to you. But here's the thing. When you fought a really good player, my gosh, those games were an absolute stare fest. Sure, he had that 4MS top light, and it was quite hard to react to if you weren't focusing, but at the end of the day, the character simply revolved around looking at your opponent and doing nothing. And that is not that enjoyable for both players involved. I want a game that is healthy, fun to play, and rewarding for both players, and especially the player that gets nasty parries. And this is especially prevalent in 4v4, where if you have no roll catcher, which is one of his biggest issues, that character is so bad. One important thing to note too is that dodge rolling was incredibly powerful. You could not guard break someone who unlocked dodged and rolled away from you. They did not add the vulnerabilities until way later on after the pre-CCU. So if they wanted to dodge roll away from you, if they wanted to unlock away from you, there was nothing you could do. Like absolutely nothing. The only thing that you could probably do was anticipate that, unlock, run, and go for the impale. That's pretty much it, and that was based on a read. I avoided 4v4 for many reasons. One, I was still trying to get better at the game, and the best way to learn the game and to get good is to practice your 1v1s. Become a good duelist, and you will be feared in 4v4 because you'll be able to hold your own. You will be able to learn how to anti-gank later on because you already have really good fundamentals. You already know matchup knowledge, and that is the best place to learn your fundamentals and matchup knowledge, because if you're fighting a character that you don't know how to fight against in 4v4, you'll have no idea what he's going to do, and you don't know how to punish them. So that's why starting off in duels and learning that muscle memory, the animations, is the most important thing I can recommend to new players instead of just jumping straight into the clusterfuck that is Dominion. So once I became comfortable with 1v1s and I learned pretty much every single matchup, you can jump into 4v4 and improve your skill from there, because in duels, things are pretty straightforward and much easier. The skill curve is just not as high in comparison to 4v4, because in Dominion, there are so many variables being thrown at you. You have to learn feats, you have to learn timings, you have to learn target swaps and ganks, etc., etc. There's so many things that involve in 4v4. So when you jump into 4v4, it's an entirely new experience, and you start to get better and you start to get destroyed. Because the people that knew the matchup against Lawbringer and knew that you could just dodge roll away from him, since he had no roll catchers, the dodge roll mechanic was not vulnerable yet. You could just simply do that anytime. Playing Lawbringer against really good players and people that knew the matchup, it was a pain in the ass. If you didn't have your parry game on point, you were going to lose the game. However, I digress. Even though the character is much stronger, objectively better, especially against really high level players that can react to everything, he has unreactable mix up now, and I can guarantee you it feels better using him against a really strong player. I will say that this character is it is a clone of every other character we have in this game. He is incredibly dull and mundane, and I feel like the shove on block Lawbringer, I would personally rather have that, have zero offense, I kid you not, have zero offense, and get some really gnarly and sick, cool punishes on heavy parries and light parries with low damages, not the very high damages that he had before, because that was obviously very broken. Nobody should die with just 3 parries, then have whatever we have right now, because what I'm doing with new Lawbringer is I'm utilizing that chain bash as much as possible, heavy unblockable feigning, and then boom shakalaka, I get 12 damage. 12 damage on every single heavy parry. That is so boring. That is so boring. The character that I used to love for the cool impale is gone. I can only get impale by running into the enemy. And when I 1v1 someone, I'm simply throwing out bashes as much as possible. You can still get some nice parries, and you're going for parries on certain occasions, but most of the time you're kind of waiting for your turn to go into your forward dodge mix-up or your forward dodge heavy, and then you can start to punish and go into your really strong chain pressure, because he really does have good chain pressure. And so the people that didn't like having no offense against good players, well, this character, he's so much better. Like, he feels better to play. You can do anti-ganks. You can make it so that you're a really good anchor. You can catch people who dodge roll away from you. This is a great character now if you simply want to have a strong character. However, if you want a character that is unique to the For Honor experience, then I'm sorry to say this character is not for you. You're better off going to someone else. You're better off going to Highlander. You're better off going to Lawbringers, you know, characters that have really unique aspects to them that aren't just simple light into unblockable or just forward dodge bash mix-up characters. I think it's safe to say that Lawbringer is a better character now objectively, but he's just not as fun and rewarding. We've come to a position in For Honor where the developers finally realized what makes a strong character for 4v4. And mind you, they balance around 4v4. They balance around so that competitive players can use these characters and rotate them in and out so that they can eventually pick those characters when they do win a game. Because when you win a game in comp in one team, you have to swap. So the winner has to swap the heroes that they pick. They can't use those heroes anymore. So it gives them more opportunities for their favorite main, their character, the character that they use the most and know most matchup knowledges with this character to utilize and win the next game. It allows variety in comp play, but this also makes it so that the characters feel fairly alike. Granted, you can't avoid making characters have some of the same mechanics, but you can keep niche characters. Keep niche characters, characters that have really interesting tools, such as Lawbringer beforehand. After every single parry, you get an impale, go into a long arm, or go into a top heavy, whatever the mechanic is. Same thing for Centurion, where you always get a wall splat. You can keep those niche characters niche. You don't have to change and remove their entire kit to make them streamlined and have streamlined offense so that they can be used at the highest levels of play. Niche characters can stay in games. Just keep them in check. Do not have them become the most powerful character in the game. Centurion is one of the strongest characters in the game because he gets to keep his niche on wall splatting for days. That is why he is the strongest character, because his punishes on his heavy parries are so strong. And so, of course, also his chain bash, which is also really strong too, but his wall punishes are ridiculous. But he is specifically a duelist, a ganker, not the best team fighter, and his anti-ganking prowess is pretty much non-existent. That is his weakness. That is what the devs should focus on, allowing characters to have weaknesses and allow characters to have some really strong strengths. Keep them fun and strong, but also let them be exploitable in certain areas. Don't try to take the fun away from us, otherwise the only fun that players will have is just by winning. And winning is fun. I like to win myself, but I also want to enjoy myself with the character that I grew to love. The multi-layered options that I get after going for certain parries, making certain reads, that is what I loved about Lawbringer, and now that's not there anymore. It's gone. It's been reduced to atoms. Why, you say? Well, to make him balanced and have streamlined offense. And that is my ending thoughts on Lawbringer 2025, what we have pretty much been through for the past 9 years. I've been here since For Honor was created, the beta, baby. It played through the beta all the way up to year freaking 9, and we're gonna get more, and I'm hoping to see some really good stuff, some Spartans, some kunai, some sais, some fistcuffs characters, whatever it may be. I'm hoping that good things will come to For Honor, but I hope that For Honor doesn't continue this path on making characters incredibly mundane, especially the reworks. The new characters like Haktun, they're actually quite unique, and I like that, and I'm hoping that they try to diversify with Sohei, but make him a little bit stronger, because Sohei is such a niche character that it is poorly balanced due to the high damage values that he gets. Ubisoft needs to find that middle ground that we used to have before and just lower the damage values. Hope you all enjoyed the retrospective of Lawbringer. Quite a long video, but there's a lot of things to say because I'm very passionate about this game and passionate about Lawbringer. I like making these videos because I've been here since the beginning of For Honor, and I think it's quite an enjoyable experience for you guys to see what he has become and what he was beforehand. You know, you get to look inside the lens of a player who's been here since the dawn of time. I haven't played every single character on release, but Lawbringer was one of them. So thank you guys so much. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will be making another one very shortly, and also we'll be playing some more Night Rain when it does eventually come out, also Wilds as well. So I think Shinobi is going to be the next character. Let me know what you guys want to see next. Retrospective. Bye-bye. See you later.